This video is for friends, family members, and anyone really who wonders why people like me and my partner Bruce are fighting against gender identity ideology, the ideology that brings us ideas like transgender. Please listen, it's really important. Gender identity ideology revolves around new meanings for words pertaining to the sexes. For all animals, including humans, there are two sexes, males and females, and these words have very specific meanings related to which of two reproductive roles an individual has the potential to play. Which gamete do they produce, eggs or sperm? In humans, a female is someone born with the primary sex organ, the gonad, known as ovaries, which produce eggs. A woman is an adult human female. A male is born with the primary sex organ known as testicles, which produce sperm. A man is an adult human male. Girls and boys are immature human females and males, respectively. There's no third gamete, no third gonad, no third sex. Sex is binary. But those who believe in gender ideology insist on different meanings for words related to the sexes. These new meanings are based on feelings, not anatomy. A woman is anyone who identifies as a woman, whatever that means. A man is anyone who identifies as a man. These definitions and similar ones for male, female, girl, and boy are all subjective, and they're circular. They use the word that's being defined, which makes each word absolutely useless. Gender ideologues don't just believe in these circular meanings for themselves. They say that everyone else has to go along with them too. Everyone has to treat any man who says he's a woman as a woman, any woman who claims to be a man as a man. There has never been a society-wide discussion and agreement on this, and most people would never agree to it. We need rationally defined words for the sexes to discuss biology, medical needs, civil rights, and so much more. Why do we care about any of this, and why should you? Because very powerful forces have imposed gender identity ideology throughout our society, and this is causing monumental harm. Because men can now declare themselves to be women, women's rights are being eviscerated. We no longer have the right to any boundaries or any female-only spaces. Girls and women undress and shower with naked men at the Y and at their high schools. Women traumatized by rape discover a man sleeping in the next bed at the women's rape shelter. Here's what was scrawled on the windows of one of only two remaining female-only rape shelters in North America as a follow-up to a rat nailed to the door, and a prelude to them losing public funding for providing a female-only sanctuary. TERF stands for Trans Exclusionary Radical Feminist, which is what gender ideologues call those critical of gender ideology. It is used as a slur. Hundreds, perhaps even thousands of men are now housed in female prisons. Let that sink in. Incarcerated women, most of whom are survivors of male violence, have men locked in their cells with them at night. Men are in the showers and otherwise constantly present. We no longer have female-only sports, even though male advantage in most sports is massive and crystal clear. It is incontrovertibly established by sports statistics, and it flows from male anatomy, including differences in muscle mass, percent of fast-twitch muscle fibers, heart capacity, angle of the hip, and thousands of other features of male anatomy. Males are flooding into female sports from high school onward, stealing trophies, records, spots in key races, and more. This is happening everywhere. Basketball, volleyball, track cycling, and cyclocross, Irish dancing, where power and strength is key to winning competitions, high school girls track, golf, weightlifting, mixed martial arts. Here's the Seattle High School girls cross-country team celebrating taking second place at the Washington State Championship meet a couple of months ago. They wouldn't even be on the podium, but for the boy who runs on this team. Girls who lost trophies to this boy over the season were told that publicly objecting could result in suspension. Any girl or woman who objects to males in female sports is punished. The phenomenal surfer Bethany Hamilton, who lost her arm to a shark at age 13, has announced that she will boycott World Surf League events as long as men are allowed to compete in the women's category. Now she's been dropped by the sports company Rip Curl. They're featuring a trans-identified man in ads instead of her. And over 200 groups and individuals have sent a letter to the organization Women's Fund demanding that Bethany be dropped as their speaker at an upcoming event because, quote, Bethany Hamilton simply does not personally want to accept transgender women as women, unquote. Transgender women are men who say they're women. And remember Leah Thomas, the man who won a first-place trophy in the NCAA Women's National Championship in 2022? Here's one of the women forced to compete against Thomas, who is fighting back, Riley Gaines. Gaines faces vicious attacks wherever she goes. At San Francisco State University, police locked Gaines in a room for 3 hours to protect her from a mob of so-called trans rights activists.
Yeah, you fucking trans bitch. I fucking see you.
It's just me. I'm good. I'm coming. You got me. I'm good.
There are men and women-only support groups for things like endometriosis, a female-specific disease. Men are taking positions and honors reserved for women to address historical discrimination. Here's Monroe Bergdorf, a man who's had all sorts of surgery, including face reshaping, in an attempt to look like a woman. A United Nations organization working for the empowerment of women has appointed him as its UK champion. Here's a man elected to fill a female district leader position in the New York Democratic Party Council. Here's Jill Biden giving a Woman of Courage award to a man who says he's a woman. Women are even being denied the use of the words girl and woman because these are now deemed exclusionary. Here's the deal. Women who identify as men, so-called trans men, are actually women. So they menstruate, get cervical cancer, give birth, and do all the other quintessentially female things too. But gender ideology insists that women who say they're men are men, therefore all the things women do, men do too. If you discuss pregnancy as a women's issue, you're now supposedly a bigot because, hey, men get pregnant too. Notices about the importance of cervical exams use the word cervix havers instead of women. The medical journal The Lancet referred to women as bodies with vaginas, on its front cover no less. We have gone from this, helping girls celebrate their bodies, to this. Women featured in Teen Vogue and on the cover of Time who have cut off their breasts and otherwise denounced their female bodies as part of declaring themselves male or non-binary. Our efforts to encourage acceptance and love of our bodies have been completely derailed, and sexist stereotypes have been elevated to new heights, as people are told that if they like things stereotypically deemed appropriate only for the opposite sex, then they are the opposite sex. Read the stories of trans-identifying people as told by them or their parents. Extremely sexist statements abound. It's shocking that people, especially self-proclaimed liberals and feminists, act like all of this is okay. It's shocking that there's such disdain for women's rights and for the courage and hard work of the women who fought for the right to set boundaries, for the creation of rape shelters and more. And it's even more shocking that things like rapes and pregnancies in women's prisons are treated as unimportant. These are happening. By the way, a standard response from prison officials when women tell them they've been raped is to maintain that there was no rape, just consensual sex. As if consent is even possible when women are locked in cells with men. In this Illinois case, prison officials say that a woman prisoner consented to sex with a large man locked in her cell who had previously strangled a male cellmate to death. They punished this woman for accusing him of rape. Where's the Me Too movement on this issue? All of this is shocking and unacceptable, And there's so much more I could say about the evisceration of women's rights, but I'll switch now to another harm that flows from gender ideology, the atrocity of pediatric sex change. Children are being told that whether you're a boy or a girl has nothing to do with anatomy. It's a matter of how you feel. They learn that somehow some people are born in the wrong body. The body they have, or specifically the sex organs they have, don't match their so-called gender identity. If gender ideology is all about ending sexist stereotypes as claimed, none of this makes any sense. If people want to wear clothes and engage in various activities that were once unfairly deemed inconsistent with their sex, they can. Those things are no longer off limits. So it must be sex organs themselves that don't align with people's gender identities. But a person can never, ever have the sex organs of the other sex, no matter how much they want them. No matter what doctors do, a boy will never have an actual vagina or uterus, will never be able to be pregnant. A girl will never have an actual penis or testicles, will never be able to impregnate someone. Doctors can do superficial things that create a first-glance impression of the sex organs of the opposite sex, but it's not the same as the real thing, not even close. Telling children they can be the other sex is a lie, with horrendous consequences. A mere 20 years ago, there were no pediatric sex change clinics in the United States. Now there are hundreds, and skyrocketing numbers of children are undergoing so-called gender affirmation care, the euphemism for pediatric sex change. Children who are uncomfortable with their sex usually become comfortable with it over time, especially after going through puberty, if they are not affirmed. In other words, if people don't tell them they are the other sex or non-binary. In contrast, affirmation locks children into rejecting their bodies. Children as young as 8 or 9 are being put on puberty blockers as part of so-called gender affirmation care. This doesn't just halt their sexual development, it disrupts the development of their entire bodies, including their brains and their bones. And nearly 100% of puberty-blocked children move on to cross-sex hormones, elevated doses of estrogen for boys and of androgens like testosterone for girls. Huge numbers of girls are undergoing double mastectomies. They are having their healthy breasts removed. Gender doctors say if a girl decides she wants her breasts later, she can just go get them. They dismiss the inability to breastfeed, loss of sensual pleasure, as unimportant. They don't acknowledge the risks and limitations of breast implants. And yes, some children are getting genital surgeries. We know this from calls to doctor's office, doctor's ads, and other data. Please understand, the children undergoing these sex change measures have perfectly healthy, typical male or female bodies. They don't have a birth anomaly or disease. They haven't been in a car crash. Based solely on their self-declaration that their sex organs don't match their gender identities, their healthy puberty is declared wrong, a disease. Breasts are said to be the result of birth defects, and sex change procedures are carried out. The consequences are horrifying. Puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones regularly lead to infertility. Doctors acknowledge that they are sterilizing children, but claim it's not a big deal because when they grow up, children may not want to be parents, or they can adopt. Not being sterilized as a child is recognized internationally as a fundamental human right, and it is being tossed aside as something that doesn't matter. Another very common outcome of pediatric sex change is sexual dysfunction, including being unable to ever have an orgasm. This again is brushed aside as unimportant. Osteopenia and osteoporosis, increased cardiopulmonary risks, vaginal atrophy in young women, which can be extremely painful and debilitating, and so many other health problems are all in store for children who are subjected to sex change. Children. People who cannot possibly comprehend the consequences of what's being done to them. People who are unwittingly signing up for lifelong dependence on doctors and big pharma. And then there are the intentional outcomes of sex change procedures. hair growth or loss, altered voices, and of course, stunted or missing body parts, all of which cause an intense suffering when people regret what has been done to them, when they grasp that there is no going back. This happens all the time. It's not rare like gender ideologues assert. More and more detransitioners, people who transitioned medically and then regretted it, are coming forward to denounce the travesty of pediatric sex change. They're angry that adults who should have protected them led them to irreversible harm instead. They want to make sure that what happened to them doesn't happen to other children. We need to listen to the detransitioners. To make all of this worse, mental illnesses, autism, eating disorders, and histories of enduring trauma, including sexual trauma, are all very common among trans-identifying children. These are precisely the sorts of things that can trigger dislike of one's sex and that can make children susceptible to false promises that cosmetic sex change will solve their problems. Some of you have undoubtedly heard that so-called gender-affirming care for children is life-saving. It's not. The scant studies relied upon for that conclusion are ridiculously biased and do not establish mental health benefits from messing with children's bodies. They don't show that suicides are reduced. There's actually significant evidence that suicidality increases and mental health declines after so-called gender care, especially over time. In fact, there have now been 4 systematic reviews of the evidence underlying pediatric sex change conducted by respected institutions and experts, all of which have concluded that benefits from pediatric sex change have not been established, that the quality of the evidence relied upon by gender ideologues is exceptionally poor. As a result of those reviews, 5 countries, Britain, Norway, Denmark, Finland, and Sweden, are changing course regarding how to help children who are uncomfortable with their sex. Counseling is now seen as the appropriate response in those countries, but not in the U.S., where medical institutions remain thoroughly captured by gender ideology and big pharma. What's happening to children is an outrage. It's child abuse. It has to stop. I am giving you only small glimpses of the harm caused by gender identity ideology. It is destructive on all sorts of other fronts as well. As just one more example, it is destroying the gains and goodwill accrued by gay rights activists over the past century. That's why there are so many lesbians and gay men fighting alongside other gender critics like me and Bruce. Here's Fred Sargent, who helped launch the modern gay rights movement. He was knocked to the ground by so-called trans rights activists. Because men are now women by self-declaration, lesbians are publicly chastised to get over their so-called genital fetishes and enter relationships with men. We haven't heard that sort of homophobic language for decades. Men abound on lesbian dating sites. Women are kicked off if they mention in their bios that they only date actual women. GSAs at high schools used to be gay-straight alliances helping same-sex attracted people with the issues they faced. Now they are gender sexuality alliances, and they persuade gay kids to come out as trans instead of gay. At the same time, laws have been passed that prohibit helping people explore the roots of distress they feel over their sex. These laws threaten counselors and others with punishment, including loss of licenses, if they talk with same-sex attracted young people about homophobia as a possible cause of disliking their bodies. Ironically, gender ideologues appropriated the term conversion therapy from the gay rights movement to get those bans passed. Gay conversion therapy entailed repressive techniques to convince homosexuals that they're something they're not, heterosexual. Now the term is used to ban appropriate and much-needed counseling for gender-confused youth, and this is being done on behalf of a repressive ideology that thrives on people believing they're something they're not, the other sex. Many LGBT activists and gender clinic whistleblowers have labeled gender ideology the ultimate gay conversion therapy. They say it transes away the gay. There's so much more I could say about what's happening to the LGBT rights movement as a result of gender ideology, but I will move on to keep this video as short as possible. Gender ideology has taken over via a combination of propaganda and suppression. On the suppression side, it is difficult to convey just how repressive things are. Anyone who so much as questions gender ideology is immediately and viciously attacked. They are smeared, deprived of livelihoods, kicked out of organizations and off social media, prevented from speaking or publishing on any topic, deprived of their bank accounts, and so much more. I personally know an attorney fired by a major environmental organization, a social worker drummed out of social work, a court-appointed special advocate for 0 to 11-year-olds who was summarily dismissed from her position, a nurse who's been in a legal battle defending her credentials for the last 2 years, and others who have had their careers upended because of their gender-critical views. And that's just the people I've been in touch with. Bruce and I can share countless other stories of people who have been instantly and severely punished for stating that a woman is an adult human female. There are vast numbers of loving parents from across the political spectrum who have lost their children to this ideology. Encouraged by gender ideologues, children are cutting parents who question gender ideology out of their lives. In some cases, parents have even lost legal custody of their children because failing to agree that your child is the other sex and failing to give permission for pediatric sex change are now deemed abusive in many places. Schools keep parents with doubts about gender ideology in the dark about their children transitioning at school. And if a child runs away to a shelter in California or Washington state, those shelters don't need to let worried parents know where their children are if those children want so-called gender-affirming care. And then there's the physical intimidation, harassment, and threats, the outright assaults endured by those of us who are critical of gender ideology. Scenes like the following two are common.
You don't need that sign. That sign doesn't do anything for anyone. You're just hating on people for no fucking reason.
Are you being violent?
Lady is transphobe. Go home, transphobe. Go home, transphobe.
Okay, get the fuck out of here. Don't, Karen.
What was this? Let's go.
I don't mind fucking leave there. I just don't want to see their meeting. I don't give a fuck, bitch. Get out of here. Get your musty ass out of here, bitch.
Look at the bruises on these gender critics, people we know, who were shoved to the ground, kicked and punched by so-called trans rights activists in Portland, Oregon recently. On 3 separate occasions, Bruce and I have been part of gender-critical groups attempting to speak in public parks that were surrounded by mobs shrieking nonstop, blaring sirens and otherwise making deafening noise nonstop, drowning out our voices, pushing into us, and ultimately shutting us down. The police did nothing. This montage shows some of the scores of high school students who were part of a big mob in Tacoma that forced us out of a public park. Their school had told them about our event. Their principal came with them to it. I have no doubt these children were praised as heroes when they got back to school after shutting us down. If you don't know about the massive suppression going on all around us, it's because the suppression is so effective. There's almost never mainstream media coverage, and what is reported is extremely misleading. All of this brings me to the propaganda side of things. As voices of dissent are squelched, gender ideology and its narratives and misinformation are aggressively promoted everywhere, on social media, on network shows, in public libraries, and most disturbingly, in K-12 schools. The indoctrination in schools is aggressive, pervasive, and nonstop. Schools tell children that what sex you are has nothing to do with anatomy. It's all a matter of feelings and self-declaration. And they introduce children to characters in books who are girls who say they're boys like Tom. Tom is a boy. When he was born, everyone thought he was a girl. And Calvin, who says, I'm a boy in my heart and in my brain. Children meet boys who say they are girls, like Ruthie. Here's Ruthie telling his family he's a girl, and then them instantly agreeing. Oops, Ruthie was a girl all along. Children meet characters like Alex. Everyone thought Alex was a girl, but Alex is both boy and girl. And they meet characters like JJ, who claims to be neither a boy nor a girl. References in school materials to anatomy-based meetings for the sexes treat these as passé. They falsely imply that things like secondary sex characteristics, rather than the gonads, are the anatomical basis of sex. Schools normalize the idea of dissociating from one's body, and they encourage it. Children are urged to go on gender journeys to figure out if their bodies, their sex organs that is, match their identities or not. They learn that they might well have been born in the wrong body, like Jazz, who declares, I have a girl brain, but a boy body. It feels good to be yourself, children are told. And being yourself often means rejecting your body. Children are read countless picture books like these, pushing gender ideology. There are official gender identity units in sex ed. There are lessons on anatomy from elementary school onward that intentionally obscure which anatomy is male, which is female. Teachers are told to avoid terms like girl and women, using terms like someone with a vulva instead. Pregnancy is discussed without making it clear that it is women who get pregnant. Here's a diagram used to show the reproductive anatomy of girls and women. Whoops, I mean someone with a vagina. Here's another example of what children are being taught. Some bodies have these middle parts. A lot of times, people with these parts are boys, but any gender and kid can have any type of body. Here's what anatomy education looks like now in countless schools. Schools enforce affirmation-only policies. Teachers must agree with children's self-declarations about their sex. Other children in the school must do so as well, accepting the opposite sex in their bathrooms, locker rooms, and overnight lodging on school trips. Girls are expected to cheer as boys steal their trophies and records in sports. At least 10 million students in the U.S. live in school districts that require teachers to actively lie to parents who have any concerns about gender ideology, hiding from them the fact that their children are being treated as the opposite sex at school. There are gender ideology lessons presented in classes for subjects ranging from biology to drama to foreign languages. There are gender ideology flags, posters, and stickers everywhere, pronoun rituals, days of remembrance, and other events that tell children that failing to validate a person's gender identity increases the risk of suicide, and that there's an epidemic of murders of trans-identifying people, neither of which is true. Emotional manipulation is constant. You don't want to contribute to people killing themselves or to an atmosphere that leads to murders, do you? You want to be a nice person, right? Then go along with gender ideology and don't ever question it. Here is a page from the book Born Ready. Every single person in this book agrees instantly with the little girl on the left who says she's a boy, except her older brother who says, that doesn't make sense. You can't become a boy, you have to be born one, which is absolutely true. But he isn't praised for honesty and courage. Instead, his mother says, not everything needs to make sense. This is about love. The message is clear. It's hateful to question gender identity. It's hateful to insist that things have to make sense. Schools are teaching children to view gender critics as evil bigots who should be denounced and silenced. You can see the consequences of this indoctrination in the faces of the young people who hounded us out of a park in Tacoma. You can see it in the treatment we received at a Seattle school board meeting in September of 2023, which Bruce and I describe in articles on our substacks. Schools across the U.S. are completely captured by gender ideology, and they are aggressively indoctrinating children into that ideology. This is incredibly harmful to children, filling their minds with misinformation, burdening them with misguided existential quests to figure out their sex, teaching them to hate and cancel people who are actually on their side, and setting many on a path to irreversible medical harm. There are also dire implications from all this for democracy and humanity's ability to address the many crises we face. Children are learning to cheerfully forfeit rights and to ignore the evidence of their own eyes, dutifully agreeing that men are women. It's no leap at all to war is peace. They are learning that fighting for justice means organizing a mob to get someone canceled. This is the opposite of the solidarity-building, system-change-focused organizing we need. Schools are training children to see censorship as a good thing, as something to actively participate in. This advances a censorship regime in our world that goes well beyond gender identity issues. Gender ideology is a key part of a huge attack underway on multiple fronts against free speech, the right of assembly, and other basic elements of democracy. And as schools groom children for an Orwellian world, social justice groups are imploding. By embracing gender ideology, they are losing all credibility with the very people needed to build movements capable of real change. None of this bodes well for humanity. In an atmosphere of extreme suppression and massive propaganda, there are countless red herrings, smokescreens, and monumental lies circulating which I don't have time to address in this video. Please talk to us about anything you're hearing that you believe contradicts what I've been saying here. For now, I'll just share 10 quick facts before ending this video. 1. Gender critics do not want to ban trans-identifying people from sports. We only ask that males compete in male categories. 2. Gender critics don't hate trans-identifying people. We don't want to kill or erase them. We are motivated by love. 3. Opposition to gender ideology is constantly described as right-wing, but there are plenty of left-wing gender critics like Bruce and me. 4. The appropriation and horrendous misrepresentation of intersex conditions by gender ideologues is despicable, and it directly undercuts the needs and agendas of people who actually have those conditions. 5. Claims of rampant discrimination and hatred against trans-identifying people are bogus. They're based on biased research conducted by gender ideology groups, which conflates people objecting to the violation of their sex-based rights with discrimination against trans-identifying people. Refusing to forfeit civil rights is treated as an attack on those who demand the forfeiture. 6. It is gender critics who are subjected to suppression and violence at the hands of so-called trans rights activists, not the other way around. 7. Claims of an epidemic of murders of trans-identifying people are fortunately not supported by the evidence. The data is clear. Murder rates are not at all elevated for those who identify as trans. 8. J.K. Rowling has never said anything even vaguely hateful or bigoted with regard to people who identify as trans or non-binary. Read her actual words. 9. It's not possible to agree that men are women and women are men in just certain circumstances, like for friends of ours, and not in other circumstances. If we agree to ditch anatomy-based meanings for sex-based words for our friends, we unleash gender ideology on the world. We are complicit in the huge harm it is causing. 10. Gender identity ideology destroys sex-based words, sex-based rights, and sexual anatomy. The whole, oh, but we're talking about gender, which is different than sex ploy, is just that, a ploy. In conclusion, if you've been assuming that gender ideology is the next phase of gay liberation, an extension of feminism, or in some other way a beautiful, liberating civil rights movement, please think again. It's not. If you think gender ideology is a science-based ideology that crushes sexist stereotypes and frees humanity, to put it bluntly, you're being duped. Gender ideology is a hoax that appropriates and undermines noble causes and instincts. It is deeply sexist, homophobic, authoritarian, destabilizing, and destructive. It is rolling back gains that were made over the last century on multiple civil rights fronts. It is doing unspeakable harm to children. And it is part of a huge frontal assault underway against free speech and against the solidarity we need to address the huge crises facing humanity. Please don't lend support to this ideology by putting pronouns in your bio, using so-called preferred pronouns, agreeing that people are a subset of their sex by using the prefix cis, and by using euphemisms like top surgery instead of double mastectomies. Please join us in defending children, women's rights, gay rights, free speech, and decent, accurate educations for children. And please don't be part of cancel culture on this or other issues. Please don't cancel me and Bruce and other gender critics. We have important information to share. In addition, we are human, and it's painful to not be able to talk with loved ones about the major efforts we're involved in and the outrageous attacks we regularly endure. Those of you who are parents, you need to come up to speed on this issue. Every child is at risk, every child. At a minimum, upon entering school, your children will be severely miseducated in the ways I described earlier. There's also a real risk that they will get caught up in gender ideology and reject their bodies, seeking irreversible medical procedures which you may not be able to stop. So please inform yourselves, parents. Consider your schooling options carefully. Try to inoculate your children with information, but understand that ultimately the only way to protect them is to change what's being taught and to repeal the gender ideology imposing policies implemented everywhere. Also take steps to protect your children from social media, a huge force pushing ideology and otherwise harming children that I didn't get into here. Thank you to all who took the time to listen to this video. Please check out the links below. Please talk with me, Bruce, and other gender critics.